Hey there, fellow entrepreneurs. I'm Sue, and you've just stepped into Entrepreneurs Gone Wild. Every week, I'll introduce you to a friend of mine, a remarkable entrepreneur who's not just changing the world, but also harnessing a secret weapon, time outdoors. Together, we'll dive into their journey, unpack invaluable business advice, and discover why embracing the wild is not just good for the soul, but also a goldmine for inspiration and innovation. Ready to uncover the secret that's boosting bottom lines and fueling joy? Hit subscribe and join us in the wild. Ladies and gentlemen, I am really excited to introduce to you Amelia Ellenstein. She's a brand strategist who combines adventure with purpose-driven leadership and entrepreneurship. Amelia helps leaders build brands that are aligned with their values. Her unique approach stems from founding a mobile agency that allowed her to paddle the Mississippi and walk across America. We're going to totally talk about that. Through her brand plan, Amelia has guided over 2,500 leaders to clarity and growth, showing that success lies in how you do what you do. Amelia, welcome to Entrepreneurs Gone Wild. I'm really happy that you're here.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here as well. I feel like we have lots in common and plenty to talk about.
Oh yeah. Like I've been looking forward to this. It's like, oh good. My people, I love it. All right. So I got to know, who do you help? What problem are you solving for them?
So I work with CEOs, founders, and solo entrepreneurs to help them build purpose-driven businesses. And I do that through workshops and one-on-one coaching. Part of what I love about my job is that big ideas are like, for all of us, really hard to express. We may understand those big ideas about what we believe about ourselves in the world, but getting them down onto paper in a way that everybody can actually understand, or a team could rally around, or your customers could get their arms around, is really difficult. And so ultimately what I do is I help people express their big ideas with clarity so they can build their business in a way that really resonates with who they are and who they want to be.
That is amazing. Because that's the thing. It's like, if we can have these fantastic, brilliant ideas, but sometimes something gets stuck between here and here.
Absolutely. And, when we're trying to run a business, I mean, I'm an entrepreneur, you're an entrepreneur. So I'm also sort of my own customer at times, right? Sometimes I say, I wish I had my own brand strategist, right? Because when we're thinking big and we're envisioning something new in our lives, it's not defined yet. And sometimes we can see it, but we can't say it.
Yeah.
And until we can say it, it's hard to onboard anybody else to those concepts, to take any kind of action at all, whether it's someone who might help us or a customer who might buy from us. We have to be able to describe it. And so that gap in creativity can be a real challenge and make you feel stuck and really frustrated, right? Because you can't move forward until you get it figured out.
That's for sure. Do you find too, and I know a lot of the clients that I've worked with for writing, it's like, the hardest business to write for is your own.
Yes.
So you said, for your own, like being able to, you're finding that too? Like,
yeah, I always try to reassure the people that I work with and my clients. People ask me this all the time. You must have it all figured out, right? And it's kind of like that old proverb about the cobbler's shoes, right? It's always easier to help somebody else through their problems than it is when you're stuck in your own head. And so the reason I share that with people is to reassure that it's a universal challenge.
Yes.
Right. Oh. We all have these moments where we have the idea, but we just can't quite express it. It's true for everyone. And when we're trying to build a business, it's especially frustrating because we can sense that it's holding us back.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And I like that, because there can be this almost an element of shame where it's like, well, do I really believe this? If I can't talk about it, am I fraud? So many people have that imposter syndrome brewing, and this thing doesn't help, right?
No, it doesn't help. It doesn't help at all. And that's when we get stuck in our head.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And then the doubts start to creep in. And what's amazing about a brand strategy, especially for purpose-driven leaders, is that it provides clarity around your most important ideas, right? So not just what you do, but how you want to do it. How does your action as a business person connect to the meaning in your life, right? And those things can be really hard to put together in a way that really comes to life through your behaviors within the business. And so brand strategy is powerful because it's a business strategy that aligns what you do with how you do it, right? It simplifies all those big ideas. So now those gateways open and you can move forward and bring those ideas to life.
love that. I love that so much because you're helping, like, entrepreneurs are my favorite people, the founders, all these people that you're working with. And it's like they're solving a problem that they didn't cause, right? They're making the world better because of that, and which is wonderful. And when they're stuck, it's not just them, it's all the people who are out there desperately hoping and praying that their solution will reach them. Like, oh, I wish somebody could help me with. And if they're stuck, it doesn't go, It's
Yes,
like,
yes. And it's so, I think it's like, I always imagine that entrepreneurs are very creative people, whether or not they define themselves as a creative person.
right.
And I mean creative in the form of being generative,
Yeah.
right? Bringing something to life. And so it's one of the most frustrating problems that we entrepreneurs encounter when we have a sense that we're onto something, right? When we know we're about to do really impactful work, right? When it feels like it's perfect for us and we're solving a very important problem, but we're stuck up here.
Yeah.
There's nothing more frustrating than that.
Yes, yes. Because then we can't communicate it. Nobody's seeing it. This goodness is just like the acres of diamonds where it's close, but we can't, they gotta have that breakthrough. So you're basically an unstucker.
That's right. I'm an unsticker.
I love it. I love it. Oh man. All right. So before you did this, like, how did your entrepreneurial journey start? Where, did you wake up born an entrepreneur, and which could, I guess, happen, but
I didn't wake up born an entrepreneur, though I know people who are naturally wired that way.
Yeah.
That's not the case for me. I had a very conventional executive career for 20 years. For the last 10 years of my career, I helped build $1 billion company and worked in the C-suite, and had a very big, busy job that kept me indoors 60 to 80 hours a week. And my entrepreneurial journey started as I got to the top of that corporate ladder, and I took a look at my life and I took a look at my values, and I realized that very slowly over my career, I had just sort of been taking like a 1 degree shift, right? Like very, very slowly, this 1 degree shift had been happening, where eventually 20 years later, I was doing work that I loved, but it didn't feel very meaningful to me anymore. And that's because I had just slowly moved away from all of the practices that make that work meaningful in my life.
Oh, wow.
And I woke up one morning, and I'm very lucky to have a husband who's incredibly supportive. And I shared this with him, and he said, "Great. What do you want?" And I said, "Well, I want a life that has room for more adventure."
Oh.
And that was the shift.
That's a guiding light. I mean, that's really putting it beautifully, because that gives you such a litmus test. All right, will this lead to more adventure or less? More room for adventure or less?
And you're absolutely right. And it's a real motto, or I love that term, guiding light, that you just shared, that we use in our lives to think about the way we structure our lives, and the way I build my business, and the way that we fit adventure into that, or fit business into the adventure, vice versa, depending on the year. Yeah. And we can use that as a benchmark to confirm, okay, are we on the right track, right? Are we really working in ways that are totally aligned with our values? Because working inside all day for 70, 80 hours a week, I now know was great for a long time until it stopped being great. And that was what started my entrepreneurial journey, was to be able to build a life that really aligned with my own definition of success.
Wow. Okay. So that you jump, from corporate into this. How has this gone? I mean, that's a bold move.
It was, lots of people often ask me like, that was really brave. You must have just sort of like plowed forward with confidence, right? And the truth was, I didn't feel very brave, and I didn't feel very confident at first. It was very scary to make that big change in my life, because we sold our house, we sold our stuff, we sold our car, we sold everything, and moved to a 100% mobile life. And we moved to start out, we moved to Hawaii for a series of years, and now we travel 100% of the time all over the country. And it was very scary to do that, because most people don't live that way.
Yeah.
And so there was a lot of outside pressure to go back to a more conventional lifestyle. And so that was really, really scary. So the last 8 years started out with a lot of planning and a lot of deep conversation. And when we first started living this way, we would plan out a year in advance. We would say, okay, how are we going to fit adventure into our lives over the next year? And we would sort of map it out. We'd pick an adventure goal, we'd lay it on the calendar, right? And then we'd fit things around it. Yeah. Now we only plan 3 months in advance. We're much more comfortable with the flexibility and the weaving of my brand strategy work with adventure together in our lives. We know how to do it. So today I'm very confident about how I do it and how these things work together. But in the beginning, it was very scary.
Sure. Oh yeah. I mean, and then there's the logistics of doing that as well. I mean, that, like when we moved here we're homesteading, and it was like, oh, okay. How do you do internet? How do you, so same thing if you're mobile. I mean, it could be if you're hopping from Airbnbs, they're going to have it. But a lot of mobile entrepreneurs, like they're having to sort out weird stuff, that infrastructure type things that are tough.
You're right. And simple things too. As a long distance hiker and a long distance paddler, one of the things I realized that I take for granted when I'm in civilization is the ability to turn on a tap and have safe drinking water without any effort at all.
Yeah.
How lucky and privileged am I that I can lift a lever and have safe drinking water,
yes.
right? Just come right out of a tap in front of me. But when I'm paddling or when I'm hiking, I have to work for safe drinking water. Right. Sure. And I have to plan my days around that safe drinking water. Right. Yeah. So logistics, technology oriented for sure, but even more than that. In terms of the basic needs that we need in order to be safe and healthy when we're out in the wilderness.
Yeah, it's an incredible, I don't want to, I'm like so many rabbit holes I want to go, but I recently heard somebody say something about he or she who has the fewest rules wins, meaning like, so if you think about, like, we make rules about what our lives need. Well, I must have, 3 meals a day, a house, a car, or this, or that, all of those things. Some people get by on 1 meal a day and they're really grateful for it. And then they don't have the angst that we have because we have so many rules about all this. And I think time spent in nature, especially like what you're like, all right, water that you're drinking, you brought it with you, or you brought some means to get it. And you're so grateful for that water. Every sip of that water, you're like, this is a beautiful thing. And it's like, you're not like, well, I need my decaf double cappuccino, it's nothing fancy, right? It's like you have very simple rule when you're out in nature. Like, I need clean, fresh, safe water,
Absolutely.
It's such a huge shift,
It is a big shift. And I think one of the biggest lessons that shift has taught me is that I actually don't need very much. And in that understanding that I actually don't need very much comes tremendous freedom and flexibility in my life. Yeah. Because I know exactly what I need, and anything else above that is pure joy.
Yeah.
Right? Absolutely. I can really savor it and appreciate it because I know I don't need it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. It changes the whole perspective tremendously. And that's really neat. I would imagine you experience, live that daily with being mobile, and then your practices for being outdoors. Well, let's get into those because, all right, guys, let me check in my notes here. She's paddled the Mississippi and walked across America. You tell, my friend.
My husband and I, it seems that if we're going to go do something, well, let me put it this way. I was on the phone with a friend of mine, and she said, Amelia, some people go out for a hike and they're gone for an afternoon. Yeah. You go out for a hike and you're gone for 2,000 miles, right? Like this is just your threshold. It's not really a hike for you unless it takes, 3 to 6 months. And I laughed because that's true. When I do things, I sort of do things kind of big, right?
Yeah.
So our first goal when we made a big life change in order to have more adventure in our lives was to begin with long distance hiking. And we started out by hiking the John Muir Trail in California, which is 225 miles. And it is the most amazing, breathtaking place I've been in my life. And that really was just sort of the gateway drug, right? Because you can't go out there into that pristine, amazing wilderness and not have something light up, right? Inside of you. And so after that, we hiked the Appalachian Trail. So we hiked not far from where you're located, right? So we hiked 2,200 miles from Georgia to Maine.
You did the whole thing.
We did the whole thing. Absolutely. It was
Wow.
wonderful. And it was very important for me because I learned about my capabilities in a way that I had never tested them before. I
Mm.
never thought of myself as an athlete, and I still don't think of myself as an athlete, which sounds ridiculous to people, but that word feels uncomfortable to me. But what I realized when we hiked the Appalachian Trail was that I actually had never asked my body to do anything like that. My body is tremendously capable. So is yours. So is everybody's listening. We have to ask it though, right? We have to ask it to do the hard work. And then we have to commit to it, to give it the resources it needs in order to deliver on that hard work.
Yeah.
And that was a big aha for me. Once we hiked the Appalachian Trail and we stood at Katahdin after 2,193 miles of walking, I realized, wow, there's so much opportunity for me to explore. If I can do this, right?
What can't I do?
What can't I can learn how to do just about anything if I give myself the resources that I need to do it. And so after that, we decided to paddle the Mississippi River, which less than 50 people do a year.
Wow.
And we started, dropped our little canoe into the headwaters in northern Minnesota. If you can believe it, the Mississippi River, when it starts, is only 6 feet wide and 6 inches deep.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
It's this tiny little stream that flows out of Lake Itasca. And over the miles, slowly, it gets wider and wider and wider until it reaches its widest point, which is 3 miles wide. So what was amazing about that journey is, one, my husband and I had never been in a canoe together before. So we just sort of dropped a canoe in the Mississippi and said, here we go. So we learned a lot.
Yes.
We learned a lot about each other. We learned a lot about the water, and we got to see the United States in a way that we had never seen it before, primarily because the community on the Mississippi River is so welcoming. And so we were invited into people's homes. We were fed. They called us voyagers and welcomed us with open arms. And so we learned a lot about the goodness of people. Right. So if on the Appalachian Trail, I learned about the capabilities of my body, on the Mississippi River, I was reminded of the goodness of people and how much love there is in the world. Right. So those two journeys were incredibly foundational as we were beginning to adapt our lives. And after we did those two things, that was sort of it. It was very clear that we were on the right track in building our lives to include and incorporate these adventures, because we learned so much about ourselves and each other.
That's just amazing. That filled my heart. Just what you were saying, that's a beautiful thing. And I think you're right. Like, nobody gets to see that part of America. You don't, and wow, what an incredible throw you in and like, hey, we're going to learn teamwork in a whole new way too.
In a whole new way, and we're unique because we do everything as a team. We aren't solo adventurers, My husband holds a Guinness World Record in long distance swimming. And so he swam 65 miles nonstop, and I paddled in a kayak alongside him for almost 42 hours. And so it seems like everything we do, even if it appears to be a solo sport, we find a way to do it together.
Right.
And that's a really special part of our relationship. And we feel so grateful because lots of people don't have that in their lives, have a best friend or a partner that's willing to, dive that deeply into goals in that way.
Yeah. And to have had a shift and have the other person be on board. I know, like when I came home with the idea, hey, honey, I think we should build an entrepreneur retreat center in the Smokies.
Yeah. What did he say?
He was like, all right. Like, tell me about this, and here we are. And it's like every day he'll be, thank you for dragging me out here. He's thriving, but it's crucial. There's no way you could live that life, or I could live this life without the partner that we have that, who's on board and shares that and is like, yeah, let's make this work.
It's such a great sign that you've hooked up with the right person. Yeah. Right? When you can come home and throw out something that's a harebrained or a total left turn, and your partner looks at you and says, okay, let's talk about that. Right? I think, okay, all right. It's just like the best signal ever that you made the right choice and you truly have a partner in this life.
Exactly.
Right?
You can bring those, hear me out,
That's right.
kind of conversation. And it's like, okay. All right. Now, what do you do like for your normal everyday life, what you're out and about, mobile, what do you do for your like daily time outdoors?
Well, we hike every day.
Nice.
So even if we're somewhere very urban, so we lived just outside of Detroit, Michigan for 10 years, and we were just in Michigan. We call it the month-long hug. We go back for a month and we just hug everybody, right?
Aw.
And hang out with our friends. And even there, in the middle of a very urban environment, we wake up every morning and put on our backpacks and weight train and go for long walks in very urban environments.
That's
And,
cool.
people ask us lots of questions because it's not often that you see people,
With a backpack.
walking through the neighborhood with a big backpack on. So we are just very committed to having walking and hiking a part of our life. And it doesn't matter where we are, right? If we need to go up and down stairs in order to get the stair climbing activity, if we need to walk outside in a neighborhood wearing our backpacks, doesn't matter to us. We get outside every day on foot.
I love that so much. And I would imagine too that like that's where, that's why we're here. Like this is why we get our, how we get our best ideas. So usually, like I kind of classify these ideas as some of them are creative, like, you're just walking around like, maybe no agenda and ideas kind of download for you. And then others are a little bit more directed, like, okay, here's a puzzle that I'm solving. What are some possible solutions or a question like that? And then we're out and about. For you, what would you say is like the big question that you puzzle on now while you're out and looking for what ideas can I come up with?
So right now, I'm in the process of developing a new workshop. And a part of my belief system is that I believe that in order to create fulfillment in our work, we need equal parts of process and practice, right? So if we only have process, then our work ends up being unfulfilling because we're focused only on productivity, right? Like we may get the goal, but it's not very soulful, right? The other side of that equation is practice, right? The deep inward practice that we apply in our everyday life to be reflective, to be connected to the things that matter most to us, right? And if we focus only on practice, then we may not have any progress in our lives, however we define progress, right? And so for me, I need both of those things. I need a combination of process and practice. So in my business, the brand plan is the process that I provide, right? Because a process generates results.
Yeah.
But I also believe in practice. And so I teach 7 sacred practices that can be incorporated into the process in order to connect action to meaning. So right now, I'm working on a new workshop that can be provided to teams in order to teach how to integrate those practices into our everyday processes of goal getting. So right now, when I'm in the morning out walking with my husband, I'm brainstorming about that. And in fact, I always say if our feet are moving, then our mouths are moving, right? Like it's such an important conversation time for me to talk through ideas, or for me to say, what do you think about this idea? And then just be a listener while he talks. So that's the specific idea that I'm brainstorming on right now. And I find that when walking, a morning walking routine isn't a part of my everyday, I actually do a lesser job of brainstorming. I feel less creative because that body movement stimulates all of the blood flow in my body, right? It gets my mind moving in the same way that it gets my body moving.
Yeah, there's something, and I guess it was Huberman who said, like, if you're, there's something about forward motion that is so important for creative ideas and progress in the things that we're doing. And it's like literally just walking. I don't know if it would work if you walk backwards, but maybe.
Well, you could try or twirl or skip or hop, right? I have a mentor who used to say, it doesn't matter what you do, you can just lay down on the floor and wiggle, but you have to move your body. So I think probably any kind of movement works. I find that when my body is in movement, I'm less resistant I'm less cognitively resistant to ideas.
Yeah.
I can be on a walk and talk with somebody about something that's actually very intense or emotional or controversial. And if we're walking, that conversation is tempered. It's more even. And I think it's because it gives an outlet for all of that sort of defensive tension or retention of resistance that builds up in those difficult conversations. And so the conversation is more easy because it's not blocked by that emotional experience of difficult conversation. So I also find that movement and being outside in nature is important for me to be more open to ideas.
Sure. Yeah. No, that definitely, I can see how that would be. That resistance just seems to melt, and that's really cool. Then we're receptive too. Like there's great ideas everywhere. It's just we don't see them always, and or we resist it, or that's amazing. Wow. Okay. Let's see. I wanted to ask you as well, like if you had a great piece of advice to pass along to the listeners.
So the advice that I would share is absolutely the lesson that I've learned over the last 8 years since we changed our life, which is the idea that we don't have to have all of the answers to start. When I left my corporate gig, right, I felt stuck for a little while because I didn't know what steps 1 through 10 were. They weren't clear to me. I knew what I wanted, and I knew I wanted to make a change, but I didn't know the 10 steps to get to my ultimate desired outcome. Yeah. I knew steps 1 or 2, right? And I was sort of held back for a period of time until I had a conversation with a mentor, and he said, Amelia, stop worrying about how you're going to do it. You don't have to have all 10 steps figured out. If you wait to have all 10 steps figured out, you won't do it, and here's why. And this was the powerful part that shifted my thinking. The reason is that in order to learn and in order to grow, we have to take steps 1 or 2 in order to get new information. I don't know step 10 because I don't know step 10. Right? I have to take step 1 to learn and then take step 2 to learn. And that new knowledge and that self-discovery or new skills opens up the view to the next steps. But if I expect that I will know the knowledge of step 10 and able to identify step 10 before I begin, I won't start, and I'll never get to step 10 because I have to begin in order to learn what step 10 actually is.
Oh, I love that. That is solid. That's fantastic. All right, Amelia, where can people find out about you, more about you and working with you?
Thank you for asking. So my website is a great place to start, ameliaellenstein.com. If listeners really enjoy adventure, they can join me on Instagram at Amelia Everywhere, or even on Facebook at Amelia Ellenstein. And those are 3 great places to connect. I also send out a bi-monthly newsletter. It's Journals from the Trail. And so it's not on a regular schedule. I can say it comes out about twice a month because I have to have cell service to send it out. But twice a month, I send out a journal entry from the trail, whatever adventure we're in the midst of. And so they can sign up for that newsletter on my website, ameliaellenstein.com. And next year, we're headed out to the California desert to hike 2,600 miles on the Pacific Crest Trail. So the journal entries will be all about hiking on the West Coast.
Oh my goodness, that's going to be an amazing trip. I can't even imagine all the adventures you're going to have on here, the people you're going to meet, the things you're going to see and feel. And that's, wow. You're living the dream. I love it. I love it.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for being our guest. This is incredibly inspiring. I hope that people will follow your example because I love how you've put adventure as a core value and built your life and your business around it.
Thank you very much. It was my pleasure to be here.
Wonderful.